Hello, everyone. It's Fiona Marks here, and welcome back to the Vedic Astrology podcast. Somehow we're up to episode 12, and today the topic I've chosen to talk about is the Sun and Venus, mutual enemies, cancel culture, and common goals. In today's episode, I want to explore the qualities of Sun and Venus and how that might have led to this mutual enmity situation that we see between the two planets. And to explore that a little bit more, we're going to also examine the areas in the sky where these planets are exalted and the signs that they rule. Then I want to look at how Venus and the Sun starve each other and check in with Shadbala, a great way to really ground oneself in the pure strengths of a planet. Then I'm going to take a tangent into cancel culture before returning to look at some common goals that the Sun and Venus share and ways that they might work together, ways we can think about them working together, and then where to see this combination in the charts that you may be looking at. At the time of this recording, Venus is about to turn retrograde, and perhaps that is what has prompted the topic today, because I also have several more Venus topics on my mind. So maybe there's going to be a whole series at the moment of Venus-inspired Vedic astrology podcast topics. And the Sun is also moving into its lowest place in the ecliptic. So with these two things in mind, the Sun and Venus is what I would like to explore. And in Vedic astrology, they are considered to be mutual enemies, which is not very common. Many planets have enemies, but it's not that common that both planets hate each other back. Usually it's a bit of a one-way street. So the other famous combination is the Sun and Saturn, and they really dominate the conversation about being mutual enemies. And we see in charts the Sun starving Saturn and Saturn starving the Sun. I guess because they're able to get so far away from each other, we get all of those aspects around opposition and things like that help give us a few more options for creating starvation. So maybe that's why they're the most famous couple. But the other famous couple, what should be famous couple of mutual enemies, is Sun and Saturn. So Venus is an enemy to the Sun, and Sun is an enemy to Venus. And in today's episode, we're going to explore how a soft, flowing, feminine, benefic planet could end up in this mutual enmity situation with the Sun. And what are the consequences of that on our politics and culture today? Let's begin by looking at the qualities of Sun and Venus. If you are lucky enough, wise enough to be enrolled in the Asheville Vedic Astrology Apprenticeship Program that is now self-paced and available on teachable.com, you'll know that one of the courses we all really enjoyed, and it's very foundational, is a course about the planets. And it's a great place to go when we really want to understand the fundamentals of not only planets, but their relationships with life, with the chart, with the person that we're thinking about. Let's strip it back to basics. So we can examine many things, different qualities of all of the planets. And if we think of Sun and Venus, let's examine some of the things that stand out as perhaps differences. First of all, we have gender, that the Sun is a masculine planet, Venus is a feminine planet. And that means that the Sun has the positive polarity and Venus has the negative polarity, which gives us the idea that the Sun is going to be action-orientated, is going to step forward and create drama, karma, experience in the life. It's going to make things happen. Whereas those negative polarity female planets in the chart are more open, receptive, willing to interact with life as it arrives to them, and that's when they interact. So negative polarity versus positive polarity. We also have a difference around being the sun being malefic and Venus being benefic. And this is a very fundamental difference between planets. It's one of the categories that we look at in Vedic astrology. But one of the things that means is that the sun, being a malefic, gives out its kashta. So whatever kashta is calculated in a specific way, but we could, in lay people's terms for today's podcast, we could talk about any irritations, frustrations, dissatisfaction with reality. Malefic planets make sure that they extrovert that into the drama of karma that is taking place. Whereas benefic planets, all the benefic planets, they keep that dissatisfaction, frustration, irritation inside the planet, keep it to themselves, and they give out their goodwill and their good wishes, their support to the drama and the karma. So it's a fundamentally different way of dealing with life. I often think that it's good to reflect on these two ways of dealing with life, because I'm sure you have come across people who perhaps do swallow all of their difficulties. And sometimes it's nice to be reminded that maybe there is health in extroverting some of this stuff sometimes. So, and equally, of course, we all know people who create more drama because they're extroverting everything and they're not internalizing. So one needs balance, but it's a fundamental difference between the malefic and the benefic planets. And one way that we might like to also see that is that malefics, they certainly make life challenging and demanding for us. And that's kind of because they see each of us as a student, a learner, someone who can grow and has the potential to be even more aware, awake, evolved, and at peace. So malefic planets really let us have it because they believe in us as students. Whereas benefic planets, I think that sometimes can perhaps fall into that mindset of seeing the person as a victim or a bit powerless and needing support and wanting, needing help to get things done. And so the benefic wants to be there to make life a bit easier for the native, for the person whoever's chart it is. So little fundamental difference in how these planets approach reality and approach the creation of drama and karma in the chart. Another difference we can look at is from the perspective of the gunas, and the sun is a sattvic planet, whereas Venus is a rajasic planet. So sattvic planets have that very pure, dharmic, auspicious, righteous kind of energy that one can think of almost as pure light. And rajasic planets have this energy of motion, of creating movement, and they get excited by movements and energizing things. So the gunas are very important primordial creative energies. And it happens to be that the sun and Venus have different gunas. The sun is sattvic, Venus is rajasic. Another difference they have is on the level of moisture. The sun is a dry planet and Venus is a wet planet. So this is a fundamental difference as well. Venus liking to keep that harmonious, smooth interaction between relationships and experiences in life, wants everything to flow. It's got a lot of moisture, being wet, to make life flow more easily. The sun is dry. It's the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. It's my way or the highway, not interested in smoothing out things, just interested in the truth. So different approaches there. And I also noticed in my notes from my planets class that the sun has the taste pungent and Venus has the taste sour. And pungent, we can think of the word spicy, that dry, spicy, airy kind of experience in the mouth, very stimulating to the digestive system, to the metabolism, gets a bit of fire going in the body. And sour is a taste that promotes moisture in the body. So I really liked how these tastes, or they highlight things that we've already spoken about. And I was quite inspired by the insight from pungent and sour. In terms of sightline, they also have a different approach. The sun looks up, Venus looks to the side, looks sideways. So as we spoke about, this goes very much with that sattva kind of approach, the sun inspired and inspiring, looking up to the potential of all humanity, the soul, the true light. And Venus, with its Rajasic energy, is here in the real world, looking at the opportunities available at the level that we are, those peer availabilities, things that are available here on planet Earth, looking sideways. And if we think about the analogy of all of the planets making up a royal court, the sun is obviously the king of the planetary kingdom, the top of the hierarchy, whereas Venus is an advisor or a minister, someone that can advise the king on real world situations, on what the people are feeling, on what the mood is, on what the good taste of the time is. So two different roles there. And if we think of their most well-known karakas, the sun is the soul or the self, whereas Venus is the wife or the spouse, which is, when you think about it, that's the seventh house. It's the opposite of the self. It's the 180 degrees away from the self. So even in those main karakas, we see quite distinct separation of these two great planets. And I thought about some words that maybe come to mind for the sun. We could think about it being righteous and truthful and consistent, whereas words that we might think of for Venus, harmonious, diplomatic. And did you know that Venus is known as the guru of the Asuras and the teacher of the Brahmins? So Venus has this dual role of being a spiritual teacher for the Brahmins, but also being a guru for the demons. So able to work with both of these levels of deities. And when we contrast that with the sun, this righteous, truthful, consistent, we can see that Venus has much more this ability to flow between different parties with different goals and motivations, and ease in the world of both types of deities, the demons and the gods. And perhaps that's reflected also in their geometric shape, which for the sun is a square. And then, would you believe it, for Venus is an octagon, right? Which is like two squares, it's got the 8 angles rather than the 4. So I thought that was a very nice, when you think of this Venus quality of being both the teachers for both types, the gods and the demons, that it's like the two squares making an octagon. So here are some fundamental qualities of these planets that already begin to show to us why there is an enemy relationship between these planets, because we see so many natural differences. But let's follow that through when we look at where are the places that these planets are comfortable in the sky. And first of all, we have the sun, who is exalted in Aries, and we have Venus, which is exalted in Pisces. So in your mind, close your eyes and just imagine the chart as you like to see charts, and just notice this placement: Sun in Aries, Venus in Pisces. And a few things spring to mind straight away. we notice that they're both exalted in signs that they don't own or rule. So I thought that was a really interesting, just observational fact. And then we've got the sun exalted in sign 1, whereas Venus is exalted in sign 12. So straight away we see the two ends of the journey. Pisces, the decisions that lead to our highest fulfillment. We know that's why Venus is exalted there. That's her calling. That's how she guides us, is towards decisions that lead to our highest fulfillment. And she uses the body, the sensory system, the somatic system, like making our whole experience, our embodied experience, as if it's a compass. So through our taste and our senses, we know to go in the direction of our highest fulfillment. The natural 12th sign of the zodiac, Pisces, it's naturally a moksha sign. It's about transcendence. And it is the final chapter. If we think of the hero's journey, Pisces is the launching off into the next realm. As those heroes, they almost dissolve, into the clouds or into the mythical heavenly world. However, right next door, we see that the sun is exalted, and it's in the first chapter of the hero's journey. So it's wanting to land with its feet on the ground, the ego, the self, the beginning of this long journey of the hero, starting right here in sign number 1. So one planet is exalted at the beginning of the hero's journey, the other one is at the end. And we can see how this creates a tension between Venus and the sun, one naturally pulled towards moksha and transcendence, the other pulled by the hero story into being the hero, having the ego, having the identity, and beginning this long journey. Now, keeping your eyes closed as you like to see a chart, can you also visualize where the signs are that are ruled by the sun and Venus? So we would then see Venus in the sign of Taurus, sun in the sign of Leo, and Venus also in the sign of Libra. So stick with me if you can as you visualize you've got exalted Venus in Pisces, exalted sun in Aries, then Venus is in Taurus, Sun is in Leo, and Venus is in Libra. I know that that's not actually possible. We've got too many planets on the board there. But just to see the layout and the dynamics, I think there's a few things we can explore. If we look at that exalted position of the Sun from Aries, what do we notice straight away? That Venus rules the second sign or the second house from Aries by ruling Taurus, and it also rules the 7th sign by ruling Libra. So those two houses, the 2nd and the 7th, these are both Marika houses, and which means killer houses. And also that 7th sign, Libra, is where the sun is debilitated. So, and on top of that, if we took into account Pisces as the exaltation sign for Venus, that is the sun's 12th house from its exaltation sign. So that's also a Dushtana house, a house of loss. So from the sun's perspective as its point of exaltation in Aries, those favorite places where Venus feels at home, they're all difficult houses for the sun. But then let's look at this from Venus's exaltation point. We've got the sun ruling Leo, the 6th house from Venus, from Pisces. So this is a Dushtana house, a difficult house, and it is a house of enemies. So right there, we're even using the words now that by being the ruler of Leo, the sun in Leo is ruling enemies for Venus in its exaltation point of Pisces. And then the sun's exaltation sign, Aries, is the 2nd house from Venus when it's exalted in Pisces, and it therefore is a Marika house. So we can see that the places where these planets resonate best on the ecliptic, where they naturally feel a sense of belonging, just by being there, they put themselves in difficult positions for the other planets. So we're really beginning to see why the Sun and Venus are actually mutual enemies, even though you would never imagine Venus having this capability to be such an enemy to the Sun. Now, what does this actually mean when mutual enemies start to use their planetary energy against each other? And we're going to do that by looking at the Lajatadya Vashta of starvation, which often is a one-way street. We already spoke about that most planets, when they have an enemy, they're not enemies with that planet. So it's just going one way. But for these guys, Venus and the Sun, they're going to bring out the worst in each other. Let's have a look at how they starve each other. So when the Sun starves Venus, we have to remember that the Sun is our inner inspiration. And Venus looks after fulfillment supplied by the external world. So Venus starves the Sun into believing that outspiration is more important than inspiration, switching that focus from inside the person to outside. Venus also dampens the Sun's natural fire of creativity because we've got that feminine masculine mix and we've got that wet fire or wet dry mix. So Venus just dampens down where the creativity is coming from for the Sun. And this makes the person do things for the approval of other people. Venus, the advisor, remember we were talking about the minister, is in the Sun's ear all the time, advising what people would like the Sun to do. And of course, that's not the role of the king. The role of the king is not to be concerned with pleasing his subjects, but to protect them, to look after them and to grow the kingdom and to protect the kingdom from being attacked. So this negates the Sun's natural intelligence, and the person doesn't know what they want inside of themselves. And so they make choices that are not in alignment with their soul. And then as a consequence, this can end up hurting other people. There can be collateral damage from doing this because it's against the nature of the Sun. We have to remember that the Sun has really got a protective relationship with those that it feels a sense of that it's in charge or that it has concern or care over. The last thing it would want would be to inadvertently cause damage to those people that it's protecting. So when it listens to the advice of Venus too much, it ends up acting out of alignment with itself. So not a great situation when the Sun is being starved by Venus. However, right back at you, over here we have Venus being starved by the Sun. So we know that the Sun inspires great achievement, and Venus is pre-programmed to fulfill desires. So when the Sun starves Venus, Venus sacrifices their personal or nurturing desires in order to achieve greatness. In fact, it can feel to them as if that is the righteous thing to do. One must sacrifice one's desires. This means that the person never feels loved for who they are, but only for what they do, for what they have, or for what they achieve. And it can impact relationships because remember, Venus represents love, it represents spouses. And it can impact the relationship because the partner is not able to penetrate this dynamic. And therefore, the partner becomes sacrificed to the great ambition, even while the person, the native of the birth chart, feels that they are missing out on love. So they might really feel that they want a loving relationship, but because of this starvation, they they feel that they must sacrifice their personal desires. Now, all of those descriptions that we use today in describing starvation, they come from my Lajjatati Avashta's visual and interactive prototype. If you've been following me for a while, you know that I was obsessed with Lajjatati Avashtas in my 4th year, and I did 2 out of my 3 video submissions on the topic. And as part of that, I developed this visual tool inspired by the periodic table of elements. And it's interactive, and you can move back and forth as you click to see how the different avashtas play out. And that's important because, remember, there are lots of avashtas going on at the same time. So I wanted a way that I could quickly flick between one and the other and read them in the order that I wanted to. And in that tool, there's also a flow diagram that explains how each avashta is created. And you can also enroll in the Asheville Vedic Astrology Apprenticeship Program. It's on teachable.com, and there is a whole semester devoted to Lajjatati Avashtas. So that's how we know that starvation, in this case, it's created for the Sun and Venus when they are conjunct or in each other's signs. Now, for other planets, starvation can be created by planetary aspect, but the Sun and Venus, they never really get far enough away from each other for that to apply. So that's why mostly you see it through being located in each other's signs, or you will see it with conjunction of Sun, Venus. But you have to remember that when Venus and Sun are in the same sign, Venus is also going to be agitated as well as starved. So it's going to be even more pain and suffering for Venus from the Sun. So this is how Venus and the Sun express their mutual enmity with each other. The Sun makes Venus sacrifice her desires or our desires in order to achieve greatness, and Venus makes the Sun doubt its own inspiration. And this leads us to take action just for the motivation of pleasing others. This is like the political leader who listens so much to their media managers, their PR handlers, and to focus groups that the leader themselves, they don't actually stand for anything anymore. They're just doing what is palatable and what will get the most votes or the least non-reactions, so they don't put off anybody. And really, you can't be a leader. That's not the role of being a leader. But let us maybe examine, what is it that the Sun is really trying to achieve in one's life and also for humanity? And what is it that Venus is trying to achieve? And to do that, I like to go back to Shadbala, because it's such a great way to ground oneself in the pure power nature of each planet. And once again, there's a whole semester on this, so it's a really great opportunity to absorb an understanding of the pure nature of these planets. So if we think about the Sun, and when it's strong in Shadbala and when it's weak in Shadbala, let's try to think about what are those differences really about. So we know that Shtanabala is what people perceive about you. It's kind of like the strongest energy that you give off out into the public. It's like your stance, the way you are holding yourself gives away something about which planet has the most strength. And when it's the Sun, the person is steadfast. They're rock solid in what they're here to do and what they're here to achieve, just very consistent. However, when it's lacking power in Shtanabala, then the person, we might perceive them as being flaky or lacking commitment to what they're trying to achieve. In Digbala, the Sun, when it's strong, is able to follow through on inspiration. Digbala gives us direction. It tells us when to take action. And of course, if the Sun is weak, we regret our lack of drive for taking action. So, We might have, because of the other balas, we might have a knowledge of what it is that we're supposed to do, but we can't hear that moment when we should take action. And when we look back, we feel that we knew everything. We should have done it, but we didn't do it. In Kala Bala, this is like the timestamp of a planet in terms of the month, the week, the day, the year, the minute, the second. How many times is the planet emphasized in time by the birth time? And when the sun is strong in Kala Bala, we have such a drive to be the first, not in a competitive, not in a put other people down kind of way, but just the joy. That is where our joy is. And, we miss those cues to act. That drive is not significant when Kala Bala is low. And with Ayana Bala, our approach to conflict and adversity, when the sun is strong, the sun is principled in conflict and noble, and it naturally, fundamentally takes care of those that the sun protects. Whereas when the sun is weak, we can be very motivated in conflict, but it can be self-centered or selfish motivation, and we'll do whatever it takes to achieve the outcome. We've already spoken about having a drive and being steadfast and committed. So you can imagine that the sun might be strong in other balas, but if it's lacking Ayana Bala, it might use that force to achieve. That's a natural sun quality, but it's motivated from the self and for the self. Now we can look at Cheshtabala, which when the sun is strong in Cheshtabala, which is about confidence, then the sun stands at the front. It stands up for what it believes in. It can take a beating. It's not worried about the flack that it might receive. It's like a lighthouse taking all of that crashing from the ocean waves. Its job is to inspire and tell us the direction to go in. However, when it's low in Cheshtabala, we're going to feel a lack of confidence to lead the situation. We're not going to want to face the backlash. And finally, Drikbala is the support that we get from supportive planets, or on the contrary, it can be the extremely active interference we get from non-supportive, unhelpful aspects. And if we have good Drikbala with the sun, it's easy for the person to achieve their responsibilities. However, if there are those active negative Drikbala, then every time the person stands up to meet their responsibilities, they're going to encounter obstacles. So this is an overview of the pure strength, the Shadbala of the sun, and we can see those keywords there around commitment, steadfast, inspiration, taking care of others, being principled, leading, being noble, all of these kinds of things, being responsible. Let's look at Venus through the lens of Shadbala. When Venus is strong in Sthanabala, there is an ease and a grace at passing through life. You just see that graceful motion, and it's what we perceive about the person. However, if there is a lack of strength in Sthanabala, then the person may want to, prefer to dodge making those difficult decisions that actually Venus is what tells us what to value and what to choose and what is our higher fulfillment. So when it's low in Sthanabala, we're going to see this dodging or shirking our difficult decisions, which really is where the long-term health comes from. That higher fulfillment comes from choosing good things, but also from cutting out the things that are not good. So that's Sthanabala. Digbala for Venus, when it's working well, we are guided towards higher fulfillment. We think about where Digbala is strong for Venus, the fourth house, that inner compass. When Venus is near the fourth house, we're naturally guided from the inside through our compass, our inner compass. However, If Venus is not well placed for Digbala, if it's up towards the 10th house, then we don't hear what's good for us. We don't have that somatic compass response, and we end up going towards things that are not healthy. And we don't know because we can't hear that direction. For Kala Bala, we're going to naturally, when Venus is strong, we're going to naturally put time into things that are of value. We're going to create value by valuing things. It's almost luxurious, the creation of value through giving our attention to those things that are important. And with low Kala Bala, we don't value things or experiences. We maybe don't even notice them, and they become neglected or run down. With Ayana Bala, when Venus is strong, it knows which fights are worth getting into. This is a real property of Venus, is value. What is something worth? So high, strong Venus, Ayana Bala, we know the value of the conflict and whether it's worth it. And we want to participate in the wholeness of humanity and acceptance of the humanness of everything, because we want to get as much as possible, share as much value as possible, receive as much value as possible in a peaceful fashion. However, when Venus is low in Ayana Bala, it's easy to overpay for conflict because we don't realize the true cost. And we can find ourselves trying to negotiate and be the diplomat with people who are too wounded to be capable of correct protocols. So you can imagine the carnage of a battlefield, and Venus there trying to negotiate a peace treaty or the correct way that this conflict should be taking place, which is all well and good. It's not that diplomacy is not useful, but in this moment of the gore and the carnage and the bleeding wounds, people, they are literally too wounded. They can't find that sense of composure to be able to negotiate. So we're just actually, Venus there is creating more suffering by trying to make people who are in pain and who are wounded do something that they're not capable of at that time. So therefore, the conflict costs even more because now we've extended the suffering by being diplomatic on the bloody battlefield. For Chestabala, when we have high Venus Chestabala, Venus values the self, takes pride in oneself, knows one's worth. However, when we have low Chestabala, Venus allows themselves to be devalued. And with Drikbala, we get those supportive aspects, then support for a relationship flows easily. Whereas when we have negative Drikbala, every time we move towards, take a step forward towards relationships, we encounter obstacles. And actually, Venus is a karaka also for vehicles. So this can show up. Relationships is the obvious one, but anything that Venus represents in the chart, when we extrovert, when we make that motion towards increasing our experience with Venetian things, then active obstacles come up to make things more difficult. So we can see that the sun at its best is about being steadfast, confident, leading from the front, meeting one's responsibility, and protecting those that are weaker than the self. Whereas Venus at her best is graceful, harmonious, guided by higher fulfillment, and an upholder of peace who takes pride in the self. Now, when they lack power, they both suffer. So they both suffer indecisiveness. One becomes inconsistent, that's the sun, and one suffers in decision-making because they can't make those tough decisions to cut out the things that are not healthy. They suffer in their actions, one regretting a lack of action, the other choosing things that aren't healthy and that don't lead to higher fulfillment. They can both lack confidence, causing one to step back from being a leader at the front and causing the other to be a doormat. And in adversity and conflict, one of the planets becomes selfish, arrogant, and can use any means to achieve the outcome and remain in power, while the other becomes over diplomatic and bogged down in a conflict that is not worth the suffering. And this is where I'm going to take a little tangent into cancel culture, because looking at the Sun and Venus's approach to conflict when they are low in Shadbala makes me think about cancel culture, which is something that you may have heard mentioned. It's something that culturally is going on in our society at this time. And dictionary.com defines cancel culture as the popular practice of withdrawing support for or cancelling public figures and companies after they have done or said something considered objectionable or offensive. Cancel culture is generally discussed as being performed on social media in the form of group shaming. Okay, so that's a bit of a dictionary definition. And to me, this plays into Venus's area because it's about taste. It's about good taste. And it's also about diplomacy and using language that is inclusive and harmonious. And cancel culture can lead to the phenomenon of companies that fear being cancelled. They start using language or producing media that is supportive of these perceived tastes. So language becomes a real medium to transact. And that's a very Venus thing, right? The Venus rules Libra, it rules diplomacy. So the language becomes a currency. And it is also seen as a way for the many who are marginalized to exercise power. However, it obviously has problems too. And one can become afraid of speaking the truth, which is one of the qualities that Sun is very strong on, because it wants to speak the truth. It's sattvic, it's dry, it just wants to say things how they are. Another problem with the cancel culture is that it tends to separate people into, you're kind of with us or you're against us groups. So it doesn't create harmony. It creates these two polarized camps. The truth, the Sun wants to speak the truth fearlessly, but when it's low in Ayana Bala, it can be selfish and it can be holding on to power. So rather than being noble and principled, it might be arrogant when it's speaking this truth, or self-righteous, or even worse, it could be name-calling. And yet at the same time, it expects to be respected for its individual truth. And we can think about this with the sign of Aries, with the Sun itself, and with the sign of Leo. Sometimes the Sun gets a bit of a bad rap for these, maybe we think of them as Leo or Aries types of things, that maybe the person is very bold, or we might even say arrogant, or they might even bully around a little bit because they're so strong in their own individual truth. And perhaps when that is the case, the Sun is low in Ayana Bala, so it's exhibiting this ignoble, not noble, the opposite of noble behavior. Maybe it can seem like cancelling is a way to even things up, because the Sun obviously is authority figures. How do you correct an authority figure with low Ayana Bala that's behaving badly? Maybe it can feel like the best thing is for the masses to cancel these objectionable things that are of bad taste. But astrology is helping us here by reminding us what the Sun and what Venus look like when they're actually empowered in adversity. And that is, the Sun is noble in conflict when it has full Ayana Bala power, and it is naturally and fundamentally concerned with protecting those less powerful. Whereas Venus, when it's in full Ayana Bala, It's harmonious. It wants to maintain peace, foster humanity sharing resources. And it's willing to embrace humanity, including the flaws of the individual, for that collective, harmonious transaction, the flow. We've talked about the wet and the diplomacy and the transactions of Libra. So the best way that we can address this power imbalance is actually to encourage the Sun, that is authority figures, towards noble actions, and Venus towards true harmony. Because when Venus tries to be righteous, that is, when Venus becomes the culture police or the thought police, it is operating outside of its nature. Because remember, it's Rajasic, not Sattvic. So it's not on that dharmic, righteous kind of guna. It's here in the real world. It's transacting with all of the peers. And this means that Venus, as the culture police, is paying too high a price for the conflict. That is, it is creating a lot of separation without gaining the harmony and connection, the value, the worth that humanity has to share. So while the intention may be good or righteous, Venus just can't go about it in this righteous thought police kind of way because it's not natural for Venus. Whereas the Sun, when it's bullying and name calling and being superior, it is also going against its true nature. The true nature is protective, sattvic, and dharmic. That means righteous, not self-righteous. So the most helpful thing that we can do is encourage the Sun towards high Ayana Bala and Venus towards high Ayana Bala, rather than turning Venus into a type of Sun culture police or turning the Sun into some kind of diplomat that says the correct terms and doesn't use terms that are offensive. We can't make the Sun into Venus, and we can't make Venus into the Sun. Vedic astrology is giving us a beautiful template for improving the Sun into its full power of Ayana Bala and improving Venus towards its full power of Ayana Bala. And what's interesting is that both of these planets, remember, gain strength in Ayana Bala in the northern half of the ecliptic. That is from Aries to Libra. And you can catch up on all of that in episode 4 of the Vedic Astrology podcast, where we did a case study looking at how the Sun's Ayana Bala and Chesta Bala affects the Earth. So if you want to catch up on any of that, it's episode 4. So where does that leave us now, having looked at through Shadbala the natural, powerful exhibition of these planets? We've taken a little detour into where our culture is at the moment, where Venus would like the Sun to be more Venetian. That is, it wants authority figures to be more diplomatic and using the correct words. And the Sun is trying to, the Venus is doing that in a Sun kind of way by sort of being the police and ostracizing. The opposite of what Venus is about harmony. But it's kind of trying to scold, which is a natural quality of the Sun. Venus is trying to do that at the moment. And yet we've seen that we need to encourage the strength of the pure, true power of Ayana Bala for each of these planets. But in what ways are they actually sharing some common goals? Let's look at the mission, the Shadbala mission for each of these planets. The Sun is really here to help us know our purpose and goals and to be inspired and confident in achieving these goals. So if you think about this mission, it shares it with Jupiter and Mercury in Shadbala to know what our purpose and goals are and to be inspired and confident in achieving them. Of course, it's Jupiter that brings a little flavor of that purpose in there, and Mercury helps us actually materialize and project manage our goals. But the sun forms part of that mission, and it really internally lets us know what our purpose and goals are, and then gives us the inspiration and confidence to achieve them. Whereas Venus is here to know, it shows us our inner satisfaction, and it helps us create a life that keeps us from regret by making choices that align with our highest fulfillment. So these are their, in some ways, separate missions. However, as I've been listening to the different qualities of the planets, I'm also really seeing some shared goals. Have you noticed, for example, how both the Sun and Venus are associated with pride? That is a consciousness of one's own dignity. And pride is a word that I think we're easily associate with the Sun, with Aries, with Leo. It goes with the leadership qualities of the Sun, and really how the Sun wants dignity for all. So there's a great pride in the Sun in a very sattvic way. And in Venus, we have a pride in the self, that I am worth taking care of and that I'm worth making good decisions for, this lifetime of good decisions that is going to preserve my DNA, one of the karakas that Venus rules. And to preserve one's DNA, you need to look after the body in so many ways, in the daily habits that you choose and the food that you eat and the choices of how you exercise and use this body, all of those things that we do that make us feel good. It's Venus that is helping us know to take pride in ourselves and invest in those things. So I feel like they share a common goal around pride. It might be directed in different ways, but a common goal. I also hear a strong common goal around commitment. I think the Sun, we can easily agree, is committed and consistent, driven, determined, steadfast. So it's easy to see that quality of commitment. But we also see that in Venus with the word devotion, a word that is often used to describe the energy of Venus. And it is why Venus is associated with the Navamsha, because the Navamsha requires our ability to devote ourselves to a life path. So although, once again, they're coming from slightly different directions, they both share a value of commitment. And another area where I think they have common goals is in the care that they share for those around us. And the Sun is extremely protective. We can think about the Sun as being the center of this solar system. It is the gravitational pull of the Sun is holding all of these planets in place, although obviously Jupiter and Saturn are having a big part in that as well. However, the Sun is the largest gravitational field, pulling us closer, keeping us on our path. And even scolding is a word that is often associated with the Sun. And the Sun would do that to keep someone on their path, scold them to keep them safe. It's not to humiliate them or shame them. It's to quickly get them back onto the right path or the right orbit. So we see that the Sun has a care for those in its charge, and the pure energy of the Sun is with that intention of auspicious goodwill to those in its charge, and certainly does not want any harm or damage to come to those that it's protecting, even if that means scolding them to get them back in the pack. And whereas we also see care with Venus because it's associated with caring for others, it's associated with nursing, for example, and with devotion in caring, making life softer and smoother and easier for those around us. So I think there are some real common goals between the Sun and Venus. But just like life, planets that are close together, and remember that from our point of view in the sky, they seem close together. They don't get very far away from each other. Venus is either the morning star or the evening star. That's as close as or as far as it can get. And also think about their exaltation and debilitation points are right next to each other. So they have this closeness, so they can rub up against each other rather than getting along with things. And how is it then that the Sun and Venus can work together to achieve their shared areas of interest and their common goals? Can there be mutual respect? I'm inspired, as I already said to you, from right at the beginning of the presentation today when I was researching the taste, the pungent and the sour. Can you, in your own body, to close your eyes, can you conjure up the experience of pungent, which is spicy, like peppers, hot peppers, or black pepper, spicy heat, kind of that tingling, explosive, exciting, variety is the spice of life. It's something that keeps us alert, awake, engaged, excited. Can you conjure up that pungent experience of taste? And can you conjure up the sour experience of taste, like all of the curds, like cheese and yogurt, like perhaps fermented things like maybe vinegar or something that you can remember is sour, or some of our fruits, like apricots, quite sour. Lemon is sour. If you remove the bitter, you have to get those two separated in your taste bud mind. Okay, so imagine these two flavors. Let's reflect on the qualities of these flavors. I'm referring here to the Pukka Herbs Ayurvedic website. For pungent, we have the pungent flavor is a combination of fire and air with hot, dry, and light qualities. There are no specific receptors on the tongue, and we perceive this taste through irritation of tissues and nerve endings. I just love this description because, remember, pungent relate the taste to the sun. This reminds me of irritation, and agitation that the sun, when the planets are co-located with the sun, they get this agitation or irritation. So I'm smiling because I think this food description, taste description is so accurate. The heat of hot foods and spices spreads through our whole system. Again, we think about it with that sun, when we're talking about the sun and being protective. It is the heat and light of the sun that is warming the whole earth. That is what the plants use for photosynthesis. It is what keeps the day warm for us in those warm months of the year. It is the light that rises each morning. So the heat of hot foods and spices spreads throughout the whole system. Speaks to me so much about the sun and the solar system. Too much heat, whether climactic or dietary, is known to cause hot emotions ranging from passion and excitement to anger and irritation. And then it goes on to say that chilies, garlic, onions, and spices like black pepper, ginger, cayenne, and cardamom are all good examples of pungent. And such pungent herbs and foods are great for drying excess moisture and mucus and for stimulating the metabolism. For example, the essential oils of ginger and black pepper are used for clearing mucus congestion or warming with a heavy cold. Beautiful description of pungent and so insightful about the sun itself. And here we have also a description for sour, the taste that is associated with Venus. It's made from the elements of earth and fire. The sour taste is considered hot and oily, but also light. It stimulates digestion and clears dryness through taste buds on the side of the tongue. Sour, unripe fruit are commonly used as digestive chutneys in India for this reason. The sour flavor is found in citrus fruits, sour milk products like yogurt, cheese, sour cream, and fermented foods like sourdough bread, wine, vinegar, pickles, sauerkraut, soy sauce, and alcohol. Sour foods make the mouth moist and increase the flow of saliva, which helps digestion and awakens emotions. What a beautiful description. Just understanding the tastes of the planets tells us so much about how to work effectively with these planets. It's one of the things you're going to pick up if you go on to study astrology with the Asheville Vedic Astrology Apprenticeship Program, how to come down to the fundamentals and from those fundamentals build up the richness of the chart. So if we think of pungent and sour, Vedic astrology is sharing with us two important experiences, ways to experience these planets and their differences and similarities. And the first way is to respect, value, and celebrate the differences, because spicy is spicy. That's a wonderful thing. And sour is sour. So this is great. They are not negatives of each other or in contradiction to each other. They are both experiences of life, and they both do great things to our energy, mind, body at the right times in the right way. So let's celebrate the sun. Let's celebrate Venus. Let's not pit them against each other. And also, I think Vedic astrology is sharing with us a second way to deal with these planets, which is once in a while, we can eat a meal that is both spicy and sour. For example, hot sour soup. Have you had Chinese hot sour soup or any other pungent, spicy, sour dish you can think of? It is an unusual combination, but it's something that one can enjoy from time to time. And it helps us clear the palate not to be expecting ice cream and marshmallows or chocolate or whatever. We get used to certain flavors that seem palatable, but hot sour soup is reminding us that this combination can work. And it is a unique experience. And let's taste it for what it is, even if there is sourness or there's a kind of sliminess to hot sour soup. It's a valid dish. And when is the right time to eat that in my life? So if you have Venus and the sun conjunct in your chart, or you have them in each other's signs, how can you make hot sour soup with that? It might not be the first thing that everyone would cook, the most common recipe. It's not the most common recipe. This is a unique, unusual dish. But how can you use that in your chart to create a very palatable, unique experience that is valid in itself? So that's our inspiration. And where is it that you're going to see this combination in charts? You want to look out for Sun-Venus conjunctions is probably the most obvious. But just keep in mind when they are conjunct, of course, Venus is also going to be agitated. So it kind of ups the ante for Venus, because not only does Venus feel like she has to or she should sacrifice her desires. When agitation is involved, it's like she can only exist if she sacrifices. So it really becomes part of the identity of Venus. So when it's an easy place to look for it is Sun-Venus conjunctions, but remember that agitation will be involved as well. Now, if that is in the chart in any way, Sun-Venus conjunctions, have a look at how that placement changes or if it changes in the Vargas. And this will give you a sense of whether the resonating energy of this particular conjunction is quite strong, that goes through many Vargas and is repeated, or if it becomes diluted in the Vargas, this might give a way for the person to work with the placement that they can feel more ease, more openness, more success, depending on how it shows up in the Vargas. And of course, go back to the D1 as well and check if there is a node or the fifth house is involved, because then you're going to be getting into some shamed action as well, because we could theoretically end up with a Venus that is shamed, agitated, and starved by the sun. So that would be one place to look. Another place to look is when Venus is in Leo and when the sun is in Taurus or in Libra. You might also want to keep in mind dasha combinations such as when it's Sun Dasha and it's a Venus sub-time period, or the other way around when it's Venus Mahadasha and the Sun is the sub-dasha lord. Then think about Venus as a karaka for love and for female partners. The Sun obviously is naturally a karaka for the father and authority figures, but you want to take it down, if possible, if you know the birth time, to which houses they're ruling, because then you're going to be able to see really in more detail the karma that is going to play out from any mutual enmity between the Sun and Venus. And when you've gone through all of that, I want to hear from you about your hot sour soup and how you are respecting the ingredients spicy and pungent in your life. Sorry, spicy, pungent, and sour. So how you're respecting those two tastes. And if the chart is asking for those tastes to be mixed together, how are you doing that? And what unusual flavor combinations are you creating? And how are you making that work? And that's where an astrologer might be able to help you unpack that complex combination if it's something that, because of the mutual enmity, it's kind of self-defeating and just can't quite get that recipe to work. It keeps failing. Then maybe talking to a chef astrologer might help just to tweak the soup recipe and see what you can come up with. All right. I hope you have enjoyed discussing all about the Sun and Venus today, their shared common goals, their involvement in cancel culture, and what's going on with our culture police at the moment. As always, I'd love to hear your thoughts. If you have a response, if it makes you think, please drop me a line or drop a comment in the blog, and I will respond and continue the conversation. All right. Until next time, take care and stay well. And I will look forward to being with you again the next time you're listening to the Vedic Astrology Podcast. Thanks for your company. Bye.